June 6, 1944, the largest sea invasion in the history of humankind was about to be attempted by the Allies. What lay ahead was the heavy fortified coast of occupied France. Hitler's Atlantic Wall. The fate of World War II and the future of Europe hangs in the balance. In the pre-dawn hours, thousands of Allied soldiers braced themselves for the deadliest mission of their lives. Across the English Channel, a brutal fortress awaits Nazi-occupied France. But today, the tides of war are about to turn. This is the story of D-Day. For years, Nazi Germany held an iron grip on Western Europe. France had fallen in 1940, and Adolf Hitler's armies seemed unstoppable. But behind the scenes, the Allies were planning the greatest military comeback in history, Operation Overlord. It all began in at the Trident Conference in Washington. The British, Americans, and Soviets agreed the time had come to open a second front in Europe. And so, a massive invasion plan was set in motion. The responsibility fell on General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force. His right-hand man on the ground, General Bernard Montgomery, leading all land forces. The challenge? Choosing the perfect invasion site. The heavily fortified Pas-de-Calais seemed like the obvious choice, but that's exactly what the Germans expected. Instead, the Allies set their sights on Normandy. As the invasion date approached, over 1.5 million troops flooded into Britain, preparing for the fight of their lives. But before the attack could begin, they had to deceive the enemy. Operation Bodyguard, a masterful deception campaign, fake radio transmissions, double agents, even entire phantom armies, all designed to convince Hitler that the invasion would strike at Calais. It worked. The Germans kept their best divisions far from Normandy. The invasion was set. But then, disaster. A massive storm rolled in, threatening to derail the entire operation. Eisenhower had to make a decision: delay and risk losing the element of surprise, or move forward, hoping for a brief break in the weather. The invasion planners specified a set of conditions regarding the timing of the invasion, deeming only a few days in each month suitable. On 4 June, conditions were clearly unsuitable for a landing, as high winds and heavy seas made it impossible to launch landing craft, and low clouds would prevent aircraft from finding their targets. By the evening of 4 June, the Allied meteorological team predicted that the weather would improve sufficiently so that the invasion could go ahead on 6 June. Eisenhower, knowing the risks, chose to go. D-Day was on. In the months leading up to the Allied invasion of France, Nazi Germany had 50 divisions stationed in France and the Low Countries, with an additional 18 in Denmark and Norway. Meanwhile, 15 more divisions were in formation in Germany. But crucially, there was no strategic reserve. The Calais region was defended by the 15th Army, while the 7th Army was responsible for Normandy. However, the German forces were stretched thin. Combat losses, especially on the Eastern Front, had drastically reduced their manpower pool. By early 1944, the German forces in France were critically weakened by transfers to the Eastern Front. Additional redeployments to Italy further depleted German strength, prompting Field Marshal von Rundstedt to lament the strategic blunder of committing elite units to a fool's errand in Italy. Rather than reinforcing a strong defensive line in the Alps, many of the German panzer divisions in France were still recovering from the Eastern Front. By early June 1944, 7 of the 11 panzer divisions in France were either not fully operational or only partially mobile. After the Allied raids on Saint-Nazaire and Dieppe in 1942, Hitler ordered the construction of the Atlantic Wall, a vast defensive network stretching from Spain to Norway. He envisioned 15,000 fortified positions manned by 300,000 troops. However, shortages of concrete and manpower meant that many strongpoints were never completed. Pas-de-Calais, expected to be the primary landing site, was heavily fortified, while in Normandy, the strongest defenses were at the key ports of Cherbourg and Saint-Malo. In October 1943, Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt reported to Hitler on the dire state of France's defenses, prompting the appointment of Field Marshal Erwin Rommel to oversee further fortifications. Understanding the vulnerability of the Normandy coast, Rommel ordered an extensive system of beach defenses. Concrete gun emplacements were built at strategic points, while the shoreline was lined with wooden stakes, metal tripods, mines, and anti-tank obstacles to impede landing craft and vehicles. Rommel and other senior commanders debated how best to counter the coming invasion. He believed the only chance of victory was to stop the Allies on the beaches. However, Field Marshal von Rundstedt and others favored a conventional strategy, keeping panzer divisions concentrated around Paris and Rouen and deploying them only once the main landing site had been identified. Rommel countered that Allied air superiority, boasting over 9,500 aircraft assigned to the invasion compared to just 570 Luftwaffe planes in France, would make large-scale tank movements impossible once the battle had begun. Hitler ultimately made the final decision. He left 3 panzer divisions under Guerre's command, placed 3 divisions under Rommel for immediate response, and kept 4 divisions as strategic reserves under his direct control, only to be deployed with his explicit orders. This tangled command structure would prove disastrous on D-Day, as delays in releasing reinforcements allowed the Allies to establish a crucial foothold in Normandy. The invasion began in the dead of night. Thousands of American, British, and Canadian paratroopers dropped behind enemy lines, tasked with capturing key bridges and disrupting German reinforcements. But it didn't go as planned. Strong winds scattered the troops, many miles off course. Some landed right in the middle of German forces. Others found themselves trapped in deep marshes. Yet, despite the chaos, these soldiers fought on. The first town to be liberated in Normandy, Saint-Omer-Église, thanks to the bravery of the 82nd Airborne. As the sun rose on June 6, the largest amphibious invasion in history began. Over 5,000 ships, 11,000 aircraft, and 156,000 soldiers charged into battle. At Utah Beach, American troops landed off target, but it worked in their favor, avoiding heavy defenses. By day's end, they had secured the beach with minimal losses. Omaha Beach was a bloodbath. American forces faced elite German defenders, fortified bunkers, and withering machine gun fire. Landing craft sank, soldiers drowned, artillery shells rained down. Casualties were most severe among the troops landing at either end of Omaha. As infantry disembarked from the landing craft, they often found themselves on sandbars 50 to 100 yards out. To reach the beach, they had to wade through water, sometimes neck deep, leaving the first wave of infantry bogged down on the beach. With the initial targets unaccomplished, the second and larger wave of assault landings brought in reinforcements, yet through sheer determination, they pushed forward. By afternoon, the beachhead was secured. British and Canadian troops faced fierce resistance but advanced inland. The Canadians at Juno suffered some of the heaviest losses but managed to break through German lines, linking up with British forces. By nightfall, the Allies had secured a foothold in France. The cost was staggering, over 10,000 Allied casualties, with 4,414 confirmed dead. But the invasion had succeeded. Hitler's once unbreakable Atlantic Wall had been shattered. Over the next months, Allied forces would push deeper into France. For all of the preparations made for Overlord, the Allied forces were ill-equipped to fight in the hedgerows they quickly encountered in Normandy. The Normandy bocage presented unexpected challenges with its dense hedgerows and narrow roads. German forces used the hedgerows defensively, creating deadly killing fields that Allied troops had to cross. The Allies had to adapt their tactics to overcome these obstacles and advance. By August, Paris was free. By 1945, Nazi Germany would fall. D-Day wasn't just an invasion, it was a turning point, a moment of courage, sacrifice, and unbreakable resolve that changed the course of history. Today, the beaches of Normandy are silent, but the memory of those who fought here will never be forgotten. They stormed the gates of hell, so that freedom could rise again.